I want to take you back to a Tuesday afternoon in late September, the kind of afternoon where the light comes in, low and golden through the kitchen window, and you're standing at the counter making coffee you don't really need. Everything feels almost unbearably good. That was the afternoon I'm going to keep returning to, because it was the last one I ever had like it. Her name was Sonya Carrington, my wife. She had this habit of humming without realizing she was doing it. Tiny, half-formed melodies she'd start and abandon, always while she was thinking about something else. She was doing it that afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on, marking up a stack of grant proposals she'd brought home from work. The humming drifted in and out. I remember thinking, this is it. This is exactly what I wanted when I was 22 years old and dreaming about what a life could look like. We had been married 6 years. We met at a friend's house party in Portland, Oregon. Neither of us supposed to be there, both of us staying late when we should have left, talking in a corner until the host started turning off the lights. She was 26, a non-profit development officer, with a serious face that broke into something extraordinary when she laughed. I was 29, running a small architectural drafting consultancy out of a rented studio. Not especially successful, not especially worried about it. She liked that, or at least she said she did. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. A simple dinner, no flash mob. I asked her across a table at a restaurant we both loved, and she said yes before I'd even finished the sentence. We married in June, outdoors, under a rented tent that nearly collapsed in the wind. Sonya laughed so hard when the centerpieces blew over that she had to sit down. 6 years. I'm telling you all of this because I need you to understand what was at stake, what was real, before I get to the part where it all came apart. Her best friend was a woman named Maxine Holt. They had known each other since college, 2 decades of friendship, the kind where they finished each other's sentences and called each other before they called their families in a crisis. I never had a problem with Maxine, or thought I did. She was funny, loud in the way that makes a room louder, devoted to Sonya in a way that seemed genuine. I treated her like family. I should have paid more attention to what was underneath that devotion. It started so quietly, I didn't even know it was happening. That's the thing about a whisper campaign. By the time you hear anything at all, the damage is already done. The ground has already shifted. You're already standing on something different, and you don't know it yet. The first sign was a Sunday afternoon in March. Sonya and I were planning to have dinner with a couple we'd known for years, the Aldersons. Sonya canceled at the last minute, said she wasn't feeling well, but the way she said it had something in it I didn't recognize. It sounded flat and careful, like she was reading from a script. I asked her if she was all right. Fine, she said, without looking up from her phone. I let it go. Couples have flat days. You learn not to chase every weather front. But the weather stayed. A week later over dinner, I made some joke about a neighbor's overgrown hedges, and Sonya didn't even smile. She just moved food around her plate. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "Nothing, Archie. I'm tired." The third week, she went to Maxine's on a Thursday evening and didn't come home until nearly midnight. I was sitting up in the living room when she walked in. She saw me, and something crossed her face, something that looked like guilt, or adjacent to it. Then it was gone. "You waited up," she said. "Of course I did. It's almost midnight. I told you I'd be late. You said 9, maybe 10. She set her bag down and looked at me for a long moment. I lost track of time. I didn't argue, but I lay awake afterward in the dark, listening to the sound of her breathing, and something cold had moved into my chest where the warmth used to be. By April, the change in her was unmistakable. She felt closed off and had become very watchful. She started checking her phone when I came into her room. She stopped telling me about her day. Once, I came home to find her on the back porch ending a call. She didn't turn around for a moment, and when she did, her face was composed. "Who was that?" "Maxine." "What were you talking about?" "Nothing, girl stuff." After a pause, she asked, "Do I have to report in now?" It hit me like a wet fish. Not the words themselves, but the contempt behind them. The suggestion that asking was overstepping. I stared at her. "I wasn't interrogating you, Sonya." It felt like it. I went inside and poured myself a glass of water. I stood at the kitchen sink and thought about all the small cuts that had been accumulating for weeks. And I started to understand that this wasn't tiredness or stress. It wasn't a phase. Something had been put inside my marriage, something foreign, and it was growing. I just didn't know who had planted it. It broke open on a Saturday in May. Sonya had been at Maxine's for most of the afternoon. When she came home, I could tell from the way she walked through the door that we were about to have a conversation I wasn't ready for. She dropped her keys on the counter with a purpose that meant something. She stood with her back to me for just a moment, then she turned. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay," I said. My stomach was already dropping. "Were you at Cassidy's bar 3 weeks ago, on a Thursday night?" I thought about it. "I was there for maybe an hour. Luca's work thing, you knew about it." "Were you there with a woman?" The question landed like a stone in still water. I felt the ripples immediately. There were women at the event, Luca's colleagues, people I'd never met before. What is this, Sonya? Maxine saw you. Her voice was controlled, but her eyes were doing something else entirely. She said you were in a corner booth with a woman. She said you two sat close, laughing. She said you looked... She stopped. I looked what? Intimate. I stood very still. The word intimate floated between us like something toxic. I don't know what Maxine thinks she saw, but she's wrong. I was at a work function with Luca and maybe 12 other people. I don't even know most of their names. She was very specific, Archie. Specific isn't the same as correct. She had no reason to lie. I'm not saying she lied. I'm saying she misread something, or saw someone else, or... She knows what you look like. Sonya's control cracked, just slightly. She's known you for years. She didn't misread anything. I sat down. I needed to not be standing. I needed to think. Sonya, I love you. I have never, not once in 6 years, done anything to betray you. Whatever Maxine saw, or thought she saw, it wasn't what she's telling you it was. She looked at me for a long time. I thought maybe she was going to say, okay, I believe you. I thought maybe the years we had, the weight of them, the substance, would be enough. I need some time to think, she said instead, and walked upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table until it got dark outside. I didn't turn the lights on. The accusations didn't stop there. Over the following weeks, Maxine fed Sonya a slow drip of poison disguised as concern. There were more sightings, none of which I could disprove, because none of which actually happened. There were whispered observations that I'd been distracted lately, that I'd seemed different, that a man who was truly committed didn't behave the way I supposedly behaved. Maxine framed each one as worry, as love for her friend, as reluctant honesty. And Sonya listened because why wouldn't she? Maxine had been the most constant presence in her life for 20 years. Maxine had been there through her parents' divorce, her first real heartbreak, the job she'd lost at 30. When your oldest friend says she's worried about your husband, you don't dismiss it. You open the door. Maxine walked right through it. By the time I understood the full scope of what was being done to me, the structural damage was already catastrophic. Sonya had become a stranger in our own home. She flinched when I touched her. She answered questions with questions. She started spending weekends at her sister's house in Beaverton without really explaining why. And every time I tried to get to the bottom of it, every time I sat her down and said, Sonya, please, talk to me. Tell me what you're hearing. Let me defend myself. She'd give me a version of the same answer. I just don't know what to believe anymore. What do you do with that? You can't argue with someone's uncertainty. You can't refute a feeling. I tried everything. I offered to let her go through my phone, my emails, my calendar. I suggested couples therapy. I asked Sonya to let me speak to Maxine directly, to clear the air. That one she refused. I don't want it to become a confrontation. It already is a confrontation, Sonya. It's just happening without me in the room. That's not fair. Which part of any of this is fair? She went quiet after that. The worst kind of quiet, not the quiet before speaking, but the quiet that has given up. One night in August, I was going through some papers in the study, and I found, tucked inside one of Sonya's notebooks, a printout of a text thread between her and Maxine. I don't think she meant to leave it there. I don't think it was a trap, but I read it and I wish I could unread it, because what was in those messages was so methodically constructed, so carefully engineered to destroy my credibility in Sonya's eyes, that I sat on the floor of the study with the papers in my hand and felt something in me simply break. Maxine had told Sonya that she'd spoken to a woman, conveniently unnamed, who claimed to have been at an industry event where I'd been openly flirtatious. She'd told Sonya that a friend of hers, again unnamed, had seen my car parked outside an address that didn't make sense. She'd said in one message that she was telling Sonya, because you deserve to know the kind of man you married. Not one verifiable claim, just a fog, a carefully maintained atmosphere of suspicion, thick enough that Sonya couldn't see through it. The divorce papers arrived on a Wednesday morning in October, served at my office by a process server. My assistant handed them to me with a look on her face that I'll never forget. I drove home. Sonya was sitting in the living room with her hands folded, prepared. You filed, I said. Yes. Sonya. I sat across from her. My voice was remarkably steady, given that I felt like I was drowning. I am asking you one more time. Just tell me what you need from me. Tell me what proof you need. I'll find it. Whatever it is, There's nothing to prove or disprove, Archie. I don't trust you anymore, and without trust, what is this? I didn't have an answer, because she was right in a perverse way without trust. There was nothing. She had just left out the part where Maxine had gone in and surgically removed the trust, like a tumor that looked like healthy tissue on the way in. The divorce took 8 months. I fought it, not because I wanted to hold her against her will, but because I couldn't let 6 years of marriage dissolve over lies I hadn't been allowed to confront. My lawyer was good, but exhausted by the futility of it. You can't subpoena someone's best friend's motives. You can't put doubt on a witness stand. In the end, we settled. The house sold, the accounts were divided. 6 years of everything split clean. I left Portland on a gray morning in June. I put what I could in the back of a rented trailer and drove east without a clear destination. Somewhere past the Idaho border, I pulled over on a long, empty road and sat with the engine running, and I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a boy. The ugly kind of crying that comes from places you didn't know were that deep. Then I drove on. I ended up in Denver. I chose it more or less by arriving there and running out of the energy to keep moving. I knew exactly one person in the city, an old college friend named Caden, who ran a small commercial property development firm, and had been asking me for 2 years to come work with him. I called him from a parking lot outside a budget motel. "Tell me you're in Denver," he said. "I'm in Denver. Finally." He didn't ask me what happened. He told me to come to his office at 8 the next morning. I showed up still rumpled from the road. He handed me coffee and a key card to a spare office and said, "Let's get to work." Those first few months were brutal. I wasn't okay. I was waking up at 3 in the morning with my hands balled into fists. I was replaying conversations obsessively. Finding the moment I could have said something different made her understand. I was furious in a way that had nowhere useful to go. I channeled it into work because that was the only container strong enough to hold it. Caden's firm was solid but cautious, small commercial projects, renovation contracts, reliable but limited. He had the relationships, I had the design instincts, and suddenly nothing to do but apply them. Within 3 months, I had restructured his bidding process. Within 6, I had brought in 2 new commercial clients by redesigning their approach to mixed-use development pitches. Within a year, we had opened a joint venture, Brooks and Riley Design Build. The work was the only thing that felt real. When I was working, I wasn't in Portland. I wasn't in that living room. I wasn't watching Sonya's face close like a door. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Caldwell, and she was the kind of direct that takes you by surprise. In our 3rd session, she said, "You're describing grief, but you're performing rage. Which one do you think is doing the work?" I thought about it for a week before I could answer her. Grief was doing the work. The rage was just the sound it made. By the time I was 2 years out of Portland, the firm had grown to 15 employees, and we had broken ground on what would become our anchor project, a mixed-use community development on Denver's east side that won a regional architectural award before it was even finished. Local press ran a piece, then a regional magazine. Then, in what I would only later understand was about to change everything, a segment on a Denver news broadcast about emerging developers reshaping the urban residential landscape. I stood at the construction site in a hard hat and talked about the project for 4 minutes on camera. I didn't know Sonya was watching. A year before that broadcast, a woman named Pamela Leopard had been sitting across from Maxine Holt at a wine bar in Portland's Pearl District. They had been friends for years, the outer ring of the same social circle that had once included Sonya and me. And Maxine, 2 glasses into a bottle of Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, with her guard down in the particular way that wine and old friendship can accomplish, had said something she couldn't take back. Pamela told me all of this eventually. She said that Maxine hadn't framed it as a confession. It had come out sideways, the way guilt often does as a kind of rationalizing, as if she was explaining something that had needed to be done. "You know, with Archie and Sonya," Maxine had started, swirling her glass. "What about them?" Pamela said. "It was never going to work. He was wrong for her. I could see it even when she couldn't." "So?" Pamela had kept her voice neutral, she told me. "So I helped it along, helped her see it." She paused. Some of what I told her. I may have embellished, leaned into things. You know how it is. "I don't know how it is, actually," Pamela said. "What did you tell her?" Maxine, perhaps because she was tired of carrying it alone, perhaps because some part of her wanted a witness, had told Pamela almost everything. The invented sightings, the unnamed sources who had never existed, the carefully worded messages designed to plant and water doubt. She had watched her oldest friend's marriage collapse, had attended the divorce proceedings as Sonya's support, had held Sonya while she cried, all while knowing that she had constructed the very thing Sonya was grieving. Pamela said very little for the rest of that evening. She drove home. She thought about it for 3 weeks. Then she called Sonya. I wasn't there for that conversation. Sonya told me about it eventually, much later, told me that she had sat on her apartment floor for most of the night after Pamela called, that she had gone back through years of memories and re-examined every one of them through this new and terrible light, that she had called Maxine, and Maxine, to her credit or her cowardice, had not denied it, instead had cried and said she was sorry, that she had done it because she loved Sonya and had believed, truly believed, that Archie was wrong for her. Sonya said she had hung up on Maxine and not spoken to her since. She hired a private investigator to find me. I don't know how much she spent or how long he looked, but he never found me. I had changed phones, changed addresses 3 times as we'd grown, and I hadn't been in contact with anyone from the Portland life who might have known where to point him. I had, without quite meaning to, disappeared. A year passed, then 2. Sonya went to work and came home and lived inside what she'd done to herself, which is its own particular kind of prison, and then she saw me on television. The Colorado Urban Development Gala was held on the 3rd Saturday of November at a hotel ballroom in downtown Denver. It was the kind of event I had learned, over the past year, to attend with a kind of graceful inevitability. Press the flesh, accept the award or the handshake or the plaque, say something about the team, say something about the community, get off the stage. I was good at it by then. I hadn't always been. I also attended with my wife. Her name is April. I want you to meet her properly because she matters more to me than anything else. We had been introduced by Caden at a firm dinner 18 months before the gala. She was a civil engineer who had worked on one of our infrastructure subcontracts, a woman with a neat handwriting and an unexpectedly fierce sense of humor that she kept mostly hidden until she trusted you. We dated for a year. I proposed on a camping trip because we had somehow become the kind of people who take camping trips together, which still surprises me. She said yes, then pointed out that I'd been sitting on a wet log and should probably stand up. We married in a small ceremony in the mountains outside Denver, with Caden as my best man and her 2 sisters as witnesses. It was nothing like the tent wedding in Portland. It was better, built on a foundation that I had spent 3 years pouring. The gala was warm and loud. I remember thinking at some point early in the evening that I felt something close to content, not the naive, unmarked contentment of that September afternoon in Portland, but a harder-earned version, like something forged rather than simply found. I was standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water when I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. I almost didn't recognize her. She had cut her hair short, and there were new lines around her eyes, but it was Sonya, unmistakably Sonya, and the expression on her face was one I had never seen on her before. Not the closed, careful look from the end of our marriage, and not the distant look from those last arguments. Something raw, something that had been sitting in the open for a long time. "Archie," she said. Her voice was just above a whisper. I stared at her. Everything in my chest lurched sideways. "Sonya." I didn't know if I'd get another chance to say this. She took a breath. "I know what Maxine did. I know everything. Pamela told me, and then I confirmed it. She admitted it, and I know that nothing I say can give you back what you lost. But I need you to know that I am so sorry. I am so deeply, genuinely sorry. I should have believed you. I should have fought harder. I let her destroy something that was real, Archie. It was real, and She stopped. She was crying quietly, the way people cry when they've been holding something for years, and the container finally gives. I looked at her. I thought about that September afternoon. I thought about the kitchen table, and the reading glasses, and the humming. I thought about the study floor, about the rented trailer, about the long, empty road past the Idaho border. And then I heard April's voice behind me. "Hey, sorry, they're about to do the awards presentation and Caden is looking for you." She appeared at my side, her hand finding my arm in the easy, unconscious way it did, her eyes going to Sonya with a quick, courteous assessment. "Oh, sorry, are you in the middle of something?" I looked between them. Sonya's gaze had traveled to April's hand on my arm, to the wedding ring on my finger, then to the one on hers. I watched the understanding arrive on Sonya's face in stages like watching a wave come in. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. "No," I said finally to April. "We're done here." I turned to Sonya. My voice was level. I didn't want to be cold, just clear enough for her to understand. "I hope you find some peace, Sonya. I mean that." Then I walked away. I didn't look back. I had learned in 3 years of very hard work not to look back. Sonya wasn't a villain. I need you to understand that. She was a woman who loved her oldest friend and trusted her in the way you trust someone who has been in the room for 20 years of your life. Maxine exploited that. Whatever jealousy or possessiveness or fear drove Maxine's campaign, and I've had years to wonder about it, she used the most intimate parts of Sonya's trust and turned them into weapons. But Sonya also made a choice. Every time I asked her to let me defend myself, she chose not to. Every time she came home from Maxine's with a new piece of poison and presented it to me as settled fact, she chose to believe the story, rather than look at the man standing in front of her. I'm not without compassion for why she made those choices, but they were still choices. What Maxine lost was obvious. She lost her oldest friendship the day Sonya called her after Pamela's confession. I'm told, through mutual acquaintances who found me eventually, that Sonya cut the friendship with a completeness that surprised everyone who witnessed it. What Sonya lost was harder to account for. She lost 6 years of real marriage that she'd misread as a lie. She lost the version of herself that would have fought for the truth. She lost the time, and the time doesn't come back. She was standing in a hotel ballroom, watching her ex-husband walk away with the woman he'd rebuilt himself into loving, and she had no one to blame but the choices she'd made in the dark kitchen of a marriage she'd been convinced was burning. It wasn't burning. She just let someone hand her a match. April and I celebrated our second wedding anniversary last spring with a long weekend in the mountains. Same spot where I'd proposed. Same terrible sleeping bag that she insists on bringing, despite having the money to buy 12 better ones. We sat outside the tent in the early morning and drank coffee and watched the light come up over the ridge. I told her about Sonya that night, finally the full version. I'd told her a condensed version early in our relationship. Divorced, it was bad, I don't talk to anyone from that part of my life. But that night, I told her about the kitchen table and the reading glasses and the humming, and about the study floor and about the long drive east. She listened quietly. When I was done, she said, "Do you still think about her? Sonya?" I thought about it honestly. Not the way I used to. I think about that version of my life sometimes, the way you'd think about a road you didn't take. Are you glad you didn't take it? I looked at her in the thin morning light. Yes, I said, completely. She nodded and poured herself more coffee. We sat there until the sun was fully up. As for Maxine, I've thought about what to feel toward her. Anger is easy, too easy. Anger keeps her in the room with you, which is exactly where she wanted to be. What I've landed on is a kind of distance. She was someone who chose to destroy rather than build, because destroying was the only power she knew how to hold. That's a diminished life. I don't need to add anything to it. She is not invited into my present tense. The company now employs 43 people. We're entering our first project in Chicago, a mixed-use adaptive reuse of a former rail depot. The architectural award that started the press attention led to a feature in a national publication last year. I don't lead with the origin story in interviews. I'm not interested in framing success as revenge, but when people ask me what drove the early years, I tell them simply, I had something to prove to myself. Not to anyone else, to myself. That's the only kind of proving that ever actually works. If you're in the middle of something like this, a marriage or a relationship being poisoned by someone you both trust, here is what I wish someone had told me. Name what you're seeing, early. I watched the weather change in my marriage for months before I called it what it was. I kept looking for innocent explanations because the real explanation was too painful to consider. Name it. Say the words out loud. Someone is working against us. It doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you clear. Insist on directness. Every time Sonya and I fought about what Maxine had told her, we were fighting about secondhand information that Maxine had shaped. I should have demanded we sit in a room together, all three of us, so that the accusations had to be made to my face. Poison works best in the dark. Pull it into the light. Document. Not because you're building a legal case, but because gaslighting works by making you doubt your own timeline. Write things down. Keep records of what was said, when, by whom. When someone tells you a story about yourself, have your own story ready. Let yourself grieve the marriage you thought you had, not just the one that ended. They're different things. The marriage you thought you had was real. It existed. It mattered. The grief for that version is legitimate, and it deserves to be felt before you can let it go. And lastly, this is the one that took me the longest to learn. Your rebuilding is not revenge. Don't let anyone frame it that way, including yourself. I didn't build a company to prove something to Sonya or to Maxine. I built a company because when you strip everything away and you're left with just yourself and a rented trailer on a highway in Idaho, you find out what you actually are. I found out I was someone who could build. That has nothing to do with her. Your healing is for you. Let it be. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you've been the one standing on shifting ground, wondering why the person you trusted is looking at you like a stranger, leave a comment below. Tell me what part stayed with you. And if you're new here, welcome to Story Junkie. This channel is for the stories that don't get told at dinner parties. Subscribe, and I'll make sure you don't miss a single one. Take care, and God bless.